Okay, so instead of tech tips for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking a little bit more about data and where it comes from and what it's good to be used for. So based on the conversations about regional breakouts during Springboard, we found out that the most common question that people were asking were, how are the KSO goals calculated? Where are these numbers coming from? So what we're going to do is we're going to actually answer that question today. And then we're going to answer questions like that and more over the next couple of weeks during these emails. So let's answer this question. How are your KSO goals calculated? So we're going to start off with the oneness number. All right? So in your key measurements every month, you're going to see growing, ministering, and multiplying disciples. Okay? And it's going to ask you for two different numbers on each of these. Okay? The first one is going to be your total number of disciples of that category. Okay, so growing disciples is, I'm showing up to a Bible study, I'm showing up to a weekly meeting, I might show up to some fun events here and there. People that are being exposed to the gospel and to the Christian life. So go ahead and let's say we have 10 students that are doing that. Okay. Now the second box is the number of athletes who are not majority culture. All right, so let's say involved in our movement we have 5 that are not majority culture. So we'll fill in 5 there. All right, and so then we do the same thing for ministering disciples. So for the number of disciples that are currently involved in your movement who have been through the material on My Athletes in Action as the new ministering disciple curriculum. Right, that's what defines a ministering disciple. Let's say we have 5 of those. Okay, and then 3 of them are not of majority culture. Right, and then we have our multiplying disciples. Let's say that we have 5 of those as well. Right, and we're going to say that 2 are of minority cultures. So what happens when this gets plugged in for your oneness percentage to happen, all right, so 5 out of 10 is 50%, put that there, 3 out of 5 is 60%, all right, and 2 out of 5 is going to be 40%, okay, and so when you go on the dashboard to My Athletes in Action and you look at the expanded widget of oneness, it's going to give you percentages for each of these categories for both your region and for all the local teams to tell you how you're doing in the different categories. Most of the time the trend that you're going to see is that there's a higher percentage of minority cultures involved as growing and ministering disciples and less as multiplying. And so obviously we want to see that as a trend that goes between all 3 of them and not just one category that's doing really well in proportional representation. And so the way this is calculated, the big number you see on the dashboard on the front page before you expand or go any deeper, it's going to add all of these numbers up. Okay, so this means we have 20 people total involved in our movement and 10 of them are of minority cultures, and so the math it's going to do for you is 10 divided by 20, and then that is, of course, 50 total. Okay, and so it's going to tell you that that is the representation that you have of minority cultures in your movement. Right, and then they would compare that to what they know about their athletic department or what you know about your region and the number of athletes that are involved and different things like that. So then this is actually calculated each month. What it's going to do, it's going to do that. And so let's say you start in September and you have an average of 50, and then in October it's dropped to an average of 45. But then it jumps in November up to 55, and so that it's going to take an average of each of those months. And so for these 3 months, the average is going to be 50%. Right? And so that's the number it'll show you. It'll show you the average for the whole year. Now, when you click the two arrows that go like this that expand the oneness widget, you'll actually be able to see a graph that'll show you your progress through the month. And hey, am I actually growing in proportional representation, or are we losing it? Are we staying about the same and not actually growing? So that's how the oneness one is calculated. The new ministering disciple is kind of a build off of this. So the new ministering disciple metric is a little bit new, but not really new from what we've been measuring all along. So our ministering disciples are people who are in our movement currently, who have been through the new ministering disciple curriculum posted on My Athletes in Action. Okay, so that's the total number of people involved. What this is asking is how many new people have been trained this month. All right, so this month, let's say that one was trained. Right, so this number last month would have been 4, and the number is now 5 because one was trained here. All right. And to help increase accountability, what we've asked you to do is to put the name or names of the disciples who've been trained in the box right next to it. Okay? And actually, if you enter a number here and don't enter a name there, it won't allow you to submit your key measurements. So that is new ministering disciple and oneness and how the numbers are calculated. The next one is sending. So sending is a little bit less complicated. You have a couple different measurements here. So the first one is sending conversations. So we're going to use SC. All right. And then there's also a staff ask. And then there is joined staff. All right, so the KSO for sending actually only refers to staff who have joined us and the number of sending conversations that you have. But on our key measurements, we will see boxes for both of these. This is a number that's actually calculated outside of key measurements. Okay, so sending conversations, this is walking someone through the send model, okay, at a point where they're at a vocational juncture. I'm thinking about switching careers, I'm graduating college and looking for a job. Those are your two big points that you want to have sending conversations with people. But not the point where you begin sending conversations. You begin sending conversations before that, but you have a sending conversation about living a gospel centered life, mission focused through the send model. So sending conversations, you report the number of sending conversations that you've had. Okay, so let's say we had 10 sending conversations. So we know that we're having a lot of sending conversations because we're killing it in key measurements. We're twice what our goal is, and we're not even done with the year yet. All right, so the next piece of that is challenging someone to staff. Now, challenging someone's staff is both a sending conversation in itself, because it's a part of the send model. You're challenging someone to live a gospel-centered life. But it's slightly different because not only are we challenging them to live out the Great Commission, but we're challenging them to live out the Great Commission and do it with us. All right? So what we can say is if you challenge, let's say you challenge 2 people to staff this month, all right? So what we can tell from these numbers here is that the one that counts for the KSO towards sending conversations numbers is this 10 up here. And because we said 2 have been challenged to staff, we can say that 8 of those 10 people we challenged to be centering their lives on the Great Commission, but we didn't challenge them to do it with us. We challenged them just to do that with wherever they're being called to go. All right? Now, the people who have joined staff. So this is your full-time staff. So your officially they're called Religious Missionary Order staff. So your RMO staff, your interns, your part-time field staff, and stinters. So these are the 4 categories that count towards the sending KSO of people who have joined us, right? So the RMO staff, the intern and stint and part-time field staff, all of these, the numbers turn over, get kind of added to the board, the tick marks get added when they've reported to training, okay? So for interns, part-time field staff, that's Kingdom Called. So that weekend right after Springboard where all the new interns and part-time field staff showed up and they got trained in how to do MPD and got a brief intro to this is who we are, this is our identity as AIA and crew. When they report to Kingdom Called, that counts towards, okay, they've arrived at training, so we're going to count them as having joined us because they get hired at training, okay? Stint is the same thing. Both Kingdom Called and then there's a stint conference that happens before they go overseas, okay? RMO staff, there are several different trainings. There's 2 mid-career trainings, one in the fall and one in the winter, and then there's a summer and a winter full training that's the 5 weeks long. So that's a brief overview of the 3 different KSOs and how they're calculated and how they show up through key measurements.